This is the $4 trillion chart. It is the most beautiful thing investors have ever seen. It goes up, it barely goes down, and it has made a lot of people very rich very quickly. If you look at the financials, the margins, the cash flow, the absolute dominance of AI, Nvidia looks invincible. It looks like a god. But gods don't usually have a single point of failure. Nvidia does. The entire valuation of this company, every single dollar in your portfolio, every call option, every retirement fund, is currently balancing on a tiny piece of land about 100 miles off the coast of China. If you zoom out, Nvidia isn't actually a hardware manufacturer. They are a design house. And the only entity that can actually build what they design is trapped on an island that is historically, let's call it, complicated. Today, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, the one risk that no amount of technical analysis or earnings reports can predict. We need to talk about Taiwan, TSMC, and why your Nvidia stock might actually be worth zero if the geopolitics go wrong. This is the story of the Silicon Shield, the impossible physics of chip manufacturing, and why America can't just build its own factories to save your portfolio. Let's start with the basics. Most people think Nvidia makes chips. They don't. Nvidia is what we call a fabless semiconductor company. This is a fancy way of saying Jensen Huang and his engineers are architects. They draw the blueprints. They write the software, the CUDA kernels, and they design the incredibly complex logic that makes AI work. But they do not own the ovens. They don't touch the silicon. If Nvidia is the architect, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, is the construction crew, but that analogy actually fails because there are thousands of construction crews in the world. If one goes on strike, you hire another one. In the world of high-end AI chips, there is only one construction crew. There is no backup. There is no plan B. Currently, TSMC produces roughly 90% of the world's advanced logic chips. And when we talk about AI chips, the H100, the Blackwell B200, the new Rubin architecture, that number is basically 100%. Nvidia relies on TSMC completely. Without TSMC, Nvidia is just a company with some very expensive PDFs and no product to sell. So why is this a financial risk? Why can't Nvidia just go to Samsung or Intel or build their own factory in Texas? This is where we have to talk about physics, and we have to talk about packaging. You see, the new Blackwell chips aren't just printed on a piece of silicon. They are massive. In fact, they are two chips glued together to trick the computer into thinking it's one chip. To do this, they use a technology called CoWoS, chip on wafer on substrate. Think of it like a microscopic lasagna. You have the logic chip, you have the high bandwidth memory, and you have a silicon interposer connecting them all with wires thinner than a red blood cell. Doing this requires a level of precision that is honestly terrifying. If you are off by a nanometer, the chip is trash. It costs $40,000, and if you misalign it, it's a paperweight. Samsung has tried to do this. They are struggling with yields. Intel has tried to do this. They are years behind. TSMC is the only company on Earth that can do this at the scale Nvidia needs. They have spent 30 years optimizing their ovens to bake this specific type of lasagna perfectly every single time. So here's the scary part for your portfolio. This entire manufacturing process, the most advanced engineering on planet Earth, is located in a handful of buildings in Hsinchu and Tainan, Taiwan. Now let's look at the map. Taiwan sits in one of the most contested stretches of ocean in history. We don't need to get into a history lesson, but you know the situation. China claims the island. The U.S. protects the island. Tensions rise. Tensions fall. Most investors ignore this. They say, oh, if war happens, the stock market crashes anyway, so it doesn't matter. That is a lazy argument, because it doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be an invasion. Imagine a quarantine, a blockade. Imagine if raw materials can't get in or finished H200 chips can't get out. Nvidia's inventory is just in time. They don't have warehouses full of 5 years of chips. If the shipping lanes close for 3 months, Nvidia's revenue for that quarter goes to zero, not down 10%. Zero. And it's not just the revenue, it's the growth story. Nvidia is priced for perfection. The stock is trading at a massive multiple because Wall Street expects them to double their money every year. If that growth stops for even 6 months because of a geopolitical standoff, the stock crashes. The bubble pops. But wait, I hear you say, the U.S. government passed the CHIPS Act. We gave them billions of dollars to build factories in Arizona. We are safe. Let's look at the Arizona project. It is a disaster. TSMC is building factories in Arizona right now. But there are 2 problems. First, it's too slow. The Arizona factories are targeting 4 nanometer or 3 nanometer tech, but by the time they open and ramp up volume, Nvidia will be on 2 nanometer or 1.6 nanometer technology back in Taiwan. The US factories are always going to be 1 generation behind the mother fabs in Taiwan. Jensen Huang wants the absolute best for his Blackwell Ultra chips. He isn't going to use the second best factory in Arizona just to make Americans feel safe. Second, it's the culture. This sounds weird, but it's a financial reality. In Taiwan, if a machine breaks at 2 a.m., the engineers are called, they wake up, they go to the factory, and they fix it by 4 a.m. In Arizona, that machine waits until Monday morning. TSMC's founder, Morris Chang, has said explicitly that the cost of manufacturing in the U.S. is 50% higher than in Taiwan. Who pays that 50%? You do, or Nvidia does, which eats their margins. So the diversification narrative is largely a myth. For the next 5 to 10 years, the cutting edge stays on the island. Now let's look at the scorched earth theory. This is the dark side of the investment thesis. There is a theory that the U.S. government has rigged the TSMC factories to self-destruct if they are ever captured. ASML, the company that makes the lithography machines, the machines that actually print the chips, has remote kill switches. They can turn the machines into bricks from the Netherlands. If that happens, if the factories are disabled or destroyed, we aren't just talking about Nvidia stock dropping. We are talking about a technological dark age. It would take the world 5 to 10 years to rebuild that capacity elsewhere. During those 5 years, there is no AI training. There are no new iPhones. There are no new data centers. The cloud freezes in time. So what does this mean for you, holding your Nvidia shares? It means you are collecting what we call a risk premium. Nvidia is technically cheap. Yes, I said cheap. If you look at their PEG ratio, price to earnings growth, they are often cheaper than Amazon or Chipotle. Why? Why is the most important company on earth trading at a reasonable valuation compared to its growth? Because the smart money, the hedge funds, the pension funds, they are pricing in the risk of the island. They know that there is a 5% or 10% chance that the whole thing goes to zero. If you believe that China and the US will maintain the status quo, then Nvidia is the greatest buy of a lifetime. If the status quo holds, Nvidia creates the future. The stock splits again, and we all buy yachts. But you have to understand that you aren't just betting on AI. You aren't just betting on Jensen Huang's leather jacket or the demand for chatbots. You are betting on geopolitical stability in the South China Sea. You are betting that the delicate dance between superpowers keeps playing the music. Because if the music stops, the factories stop. And if the factories stop, the most valuable company in history becomes a very expensive collection of intellectual property that nobody can build. Nvidia is a castle. It is a magnificent golden castle reaching into the clouds. But never forget that the castle is built on an island, and the water is rising. Invest accordingly.